Hey there, and good morning to the second day of the Human and AI Symposium. Today, we're going to start the day with the keynote presentation delivered by Dorian Cougias, and he is the co founder and CEO of Unified Compliance. When he's not dressing like a tree or jumping out of airplanes, he is working alongside guiding Fortune 1000 companies with their regulatory compliance needs. And if we could just take a quick look at that binder full of patents, you have over 22 patents in the office, everything to do with unified compliance and how to best serve your organizations, your clients' organizations. Um, yeah, would you care to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you've done over the course of the last 22 years at Unified Compliance?
Well, we actually did found the Unified Compliance Framework. We founded the very first, what people are now calling knowledge graph and entity resource graph for understanding compliance and then being able to apply it. I'd rather spend all of our time talking about this stuff because I'm boring. So the presentation is cool, but I'm boring.
I heavily doubt that, but let's move on to the presentation nonetheless.
Outstanding. So welcome, everybody. This is the title, Transparency is a Safeguard. I am Dorian Cougias, Cougias, whatever you want to say. I don't really care. Just give me a call if you need me. There's my LinkedIn bio if you want to get on up there. I don't jump out of planes anymore. My brother still does. I'm too old for that crap. I just sit around at the bottom. So welcome. Today, we really need to delve into the fascinating world, at least I think it's fascinating, of AI-driven insights and explore how to balance what you're doing with explainability. And I don't know why it keeps doing that on that slide. In this prezzo, we're going to look at the various analytical approaches, and our objectives are really to understand the different methods available to us with these analytical methods to understand explainability, to understand accountability in what we're doing, not just in AI, but as you transition from human to AI. Because in risk and compliance, explainability and accountability are paramount. If you don't get those right, well, you're host. By the end of the presentation, I hope you're going to have a clear understanding of how to leverage these analytical methods to enhance your data analysis capabilities, because that's what really risk and compliance is about, to make informed decisions about what you want to do versus what you're willing to risk. All right, so let's look at this. We're gonna. I'm not really big into bullet points. All right, you face threats, weaknesses, vulnerabilities that can affect your business. You know, the things we're showing up here, the roles. That's the yellow one, the green, the vendors, assets, configuration items, configuration settings, your organizational functions, regular examples, data contents, your events. These underlying threats and weaknesses can affect those things, and you need to understand that. More importantly, what you need is a way to figure out what's what when you're being hit by these threats. The figuring out what's what, fancy people call this disambiguation. So this is one of those fancy presentations. Oh my gosh, the people presenting yesterday were so cool and so smart. Shaista, Alina, you know, you got to go back and watch those presentations. Once you know what's what, once you've disambiguated this, you need to align and harmonize these various regulations and standards together, because they're what point to what you need to do with your roles, your configurations, your records, the events that are happening. So this stuff on the left, outside of that box, that's your business. These are the regulations and standards, the STIGs, you know, the Secure Technical Implementation Guides, the citations that are pointing to those things that tell you how to protect them, so that on the outside of that, you have your metrics, your common controls, your audit. If you didn't dawn on you by now, this is an image version of your compliance framework laid out as a graph. More specifically, it's an entity relationship graph. That's important. It's overall, everything's a knowledge graph, and these terms have been used in the last couple of days, but this is what the entity relationship graph looks like inside of that knowledge graph if you're tying it together. This is going to be really, really important, okay? Because you have to understand how it gets there. I only have 40 minutes this morning, so I'm going to be going through how you get stuff in, how that applies to risk, and how it comes on out. You need to understand how it gets in there, how it gets disambiguated, how it gets aligned, how it gets harmonized, and more importantly, how you're going to transfer how people are doing that right now into AI and explain what AI is doing in place of the people. Okay, how are you going to ensure that AI is using is both transparent and explainable? In this short prezzo, we're going to jump back and forth between this ERG and micro stuff. All right, how do we do this? How do you analyze your compliance framework, your ERG, those regulations and standards, apply them to the documents you have to manage, the processes you have to put in place, the assets you have to protect, the audits you have to perform? There's 5 ways. Okay, there's curated, that's humans, heuristics, simple, explicit. You can read. I don't need to read this for you. So we're going to start with curated. Okay, dog, yellow cat, banana. This is a real world experiment. I had a person working with us, and they were just not doing semantic analysis, and I grabbed these pictures have been around a long time. I grabbed these 3 pictures, I printed them out, I walked in, and I had all the mappers there, and I said, draw me the relationships. And so the first one I got was dog, yellow cat, relationship between animals. Another person said relationship, I can see that they have tails and legs. Okay, that's a different kind of relationship, but that's an explainable relationship nonetheless. That's cool, acceptable, right? The next one was people saying, well, really simple, yellow cat, yellowish cat, because that's all I could find that day, and banana. Hey, cool, I can accept that. You're basing it on color. That's an attribute relationship. Then there was this Yutz. He said, dog to banana, and he turned in the paper, and I looked at it. I went, okay, seriously. Here's literally his answer. My dog likes bananas. I'll let that sink in for a second. It wasn't a classification of large forms of content. It wasn't anything else. It was his particular dog liked bananas. Curated analysis is time consuming. It is fraught with personal bias on the part of subject matter experts. And at scale, it is also fraught with incorrectness and inconsistency. Pure curated analysis without machine learning now, you should just don't. All right, just don't. Let's get into heuristic analysis. Heuristic analysis is very simple. It uses predefined rules for evaluation. This is the process over on the right. It's a plant UML doc, thing. Look, identify the category, apply the rule. Identify the shared attributes, apply the rule. Remember shared attributes, legs, tail. Check for significant shared attributes. Identify abstract features like color. And then noticing here, when you're doing heuristics, you can also put in counterfactual analysis. That's something that humans don't think of. So at least when you're doing heuristic analysis, which is a step above, you can apply counterfactual analysis, which a couple people covered yesterday, and that's something that you need to think through. And more importantly, once you get into machine learning, not only can you say, hey, do this, and by the way, that is pseudo code in Python. All right, I can give you the code, you download it, you can get the pseudo code, you can try this stuff I'm talking about. We're going to get into real hands-on in a few minutes. Then you can say, give me the output as JSON. You should be doing your outputs and all the stuff that you're mapping, all the stuff that you're analyzing. It should not be text-based, should not be word-based. You need to have structured input, structured output. And so you can say, give me a confidence score range or confidence score. Confidence score is going to be very important to you. Explainable AI needs to tell you with what certainty level, with what confidence level it came up with an answer. and then it needs to calculate it, and it needs to give it to you in a structured format. That's very, very, very important. So this JSON is now giving us, how it did it, how it applied the rules, and then what the confidence scores are. Okay. Now, if you look, cat, dog, cat, banana, dog, banana, using any logic other than that Yutz's logic is only 22%. All right. You also have to ask yourself, when doing a confidence score, what's the minimum viable score you want? Is 72 passing in your organization? 82, when I got a 72 in school, that wasn't the world's greatest score. So you have to think about confidence scores and where that fits in explainability. So now let's talk about explicit AI above heuristics. Explicit AI, or what they call EAI, is a clear rules-based system with interpretable models. Now we're going not just on rules, but now models. That's more advanced than heuristics. So for example, evaluating relationships with a confidence score based on predefined rules, the heuristics, and then incorporating additional categorical attribute and abstract feature similarities, and adding counterfactual analysis. And by the way, this is the pseudocode. We can come up with relationships that's in here. Now, the problem with explicit AI isn't going to give you how it did that because you were explicit when you wrote the rules. So the balance with explicit AI is that you're telling it what you want to do, but you're also being explicit how you wanted it to do that, how you wanted it to arrive at it. So if you're ever going to audit explicit AI, you're going to have to audit it in context of the rules you put in. I'll let that sink in. Remember, explainable AI. If you're using explicit, you're really going to need to go back to what rules did we put in. Then there's generative AI. This is for all you prompt engineers out there. And God, I hate that term. That term to me is just as bad as, somebody being an influencer. All right. It returns, tell it to return JSON. If you're doing prompt engineering, and for today's demo, I'm going to show you prompt engineering on steroids. You need to get it to return JSON, but it uses pattern recognition, but generative AI, unless you're telling it what to do, isn't very, very specific in that. Now, explainable AI. Explainable AI can sit on top of generative AI. Explainable AI isn't separate from generative AI because what you're doing with explainable AI is you're saying, look, I'm going to be really explicit about how I want you to do what I want you to do. And I want you to give me confidence scores at the end. And I want you to show me additional things to it. So if you're going to be doing prompt engineering, if you're going to be building out this stuff, you're going to need to say, look, I also want to have an output format for you that says, here's the relationship. Show me every relationship. Give me a combined confidence score, and then explain at the end how you came up with a combined confidence score. Okay, so here's the confidence score. Here's the percentage. And for every methodology, I want you to explain the methodology. So here's the methodology I used for that. Feature importance saliency maps. When the cat and the banana, it can't use the same. It has to use attribute-based with counterfactual explanations. When you get to the dog and the banana, it's got to look at feature importance, saliency maps, attribute explanation. It had to use a whole bunch of things because we told it, use any of these things that might apply, that you might come up with something. By the way, explainability didn't get much to it either. That was fun. That was fun, right? But how does that really, really tie into what we're doing? We got to go back to your ERG, your risk and compliance ERG. And you have to understand how it gets in there to understand the risk and compliance stuff at the end, okay? Because remember, down here on section 5 is where it hits you, but there's all this content that needs to come in first to build your ERG. Today, I only have so much time. We're going to focus on this part right here. understanding the terms that are coming in. There's a whole bunch of stuff that it goes through, but we need to understand the part where we're tagging the mandates within the citations to understand what those mandates mean so that they can apply to the things that we're doing and then add them to the dictionary terms. Okay. We're going to use two very, very common terms when we look at this: personal data and personal information. We're also going to be going up to compliancedictionary.com. I already downloaded it. When you get to the end, you'll have a call to action where you can pull this stuff up and you can actually test it. You can go to our call to action. I'll give you the files that I'm using for testing. I'll give you the prompts I'm using, and you can see what's going on. Then you can ask us how we got to some of this stuff. So we're going to be drawing and I'll show you Compliance Dictionary in a minute. We're going to be drawing the corpus for examination from there, because with Explainable AI, you really do need a corpus. So what's this thing that I've got on the process or on the page? This is the actual Explainable AI process, just for asking the question, is personal data the same as personal information? Okay, we're not even into risk analysis yet. We're just saying, hey, are these the same things? Are these synonyms? Are these hyponyms? Are these hypernyms? How do we determine this? Explainable AI has a very, very deep process. I'm not going to go into this whole process with you right here. When you download my presentation, the whole process explained is in the notes. So, yay, this is the part where we're going to go live. All right. And ChatGPT, interestingly, all right, there's way too many windows. First thing I'm also going to put in here compliancedictionary.com, so we can go bounce back and forth with that. All right, ChatGPT. I have got some prompts up here, and I'm going to go and I'm going to open up my first prompt. I'm going to paste it in, and we're going to run it. So the prompt is using simple GAI. It needs you to determine whether two terms are synonyms, hyponyms. Here's the definitions. Oh, I also have to grab from it personal information and personal data. Yep, it says, hey, I need the corpus if I'm going to understand it. And so given this prompt, I need you to understand it. Given the data, I want you to look at data usage. I want you to return the relationships. It's going to walk through what it's going to go do. It's telling you all of that. And it's coming up. And it's tokenizing it. And it's analyzing. And it's doing it live in front of us. I'm going to get the next prompt ready just so that when it's done, I've got a more explainable prompt. Come on, analyze. Wow, it's analyzing slow this morning. So look at what it's doing. It's going straight to cosine similarity. I didn't ask it to, because if you don't ask GAI to do something specifically or tell it which methods you want, it's going to go guess its methods. And sometimes that's interesting and sometimes it's not. And why it's taking so much time this morning to analyze, I have no idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this tab. So while we're waiting, what do you mean analysis paused? You're analyzing over there. All right. I'm going to go over to here and I'm going to create a new one. And I'm going to give it an explainable. So is this thing still analyzing? Wow. Of course, you go to do it live. I did this 400 times. And let me drag in the corpus so it can use the corpus. There we go. All right. Yay. So it came back and it said, just, hey, they're synonyms. It told us up here in this portion what it was doing, but it then gave us the answer because we didn't ask it to give a big answer that, yeah, these are synonyms. So what I did here now is it's an explainable AI prompt. I went into the explainable AI prompt and I said, here's definitions, here's data. And now in the analysis requirements, I want you to do these things. I want you to identify and tag them and treat them as multi-word expressions, personal data and personal information. Why did I tell it that? Because if you don't, you're going to get personal data and information, because systems don't know what multi-word expressions are unless you tell them what multi-word expressions are, which means that in your input process, if you're not pre-tagging for multi-word expressions, if you're not doing research on how to draw out those multi-word expressions, or as Alina was talking about, if you're not working with people to give you input for, hey, how, these are multi-word expressions, you're going to get bad information. And then it's going to give us the output, and it's going to give us the response format. And while that's analyzing, we're going to go back to this one since we cleared the memory. And I'm going to ask it for a very explainable prompt. Here's a very explainable prompt. And so that you don't yell at me, I'm going to drag these things in to begin with. So while you're analyzing over here, I'm going to go explain this prompt. This prompt now says, okay, here's the definitions. Now I've got, was this the, did I grab very explainable? Analysis requirements. Where's my analysis? No, I don't want this one. Stop. I want very explainable. All right, let's go put that one in. And it's going to ask me for personal data and personal information again. Okay, so let's go back and see if this one's done. Great, this one's done. So with this prompt, here's the analysis requirements. I want you to analyze these things. Now I said, I want you to go on in and calculate definition encoded distance vectors. You're going to go look into the definitions and you're going to find out how far apart they are from each other. That's kind of important. So if you go to compliancedictionary.com and you put in personal data, you're going to get all of these relationships in here, because this is an entity relationship graph of the term personal data and what is in personal data to the right and what affects personal data on the left, and how these things combine to each other. So, is used to enforce, includes, what's this relation, is referenced by, manages. So we already have an entity relationship graph for these. So we're saying use definition encoded distance vectors. What that means is this is one hop from here, definition encoded distance vector, how many hops away it is. So we're saying use that methodology, identify semantic relationships, analyze context, frequency of usage through all of that, and now come on up, give me a score and tell me the methods. That's important, okay? Very explainable AI is going through, and not only all of that, but it's adding additional analysis requirements. And in the implementation details, it's saying exactly which libraries you want. The epitome of explainable AI is the method, how I want you to analyze, the implementation, the libraries I want you to use, the output, what I'm asking you to do, the input, and then how you're going to calculate it and what you're going to present. Now, there's also another part of this up here that I put in, and using explaining confidence score of whether two terms are synonyms. There's one more we need, and that's the preference-based learning prompt. All right, so while this thing is doing its thing, I'm going to add one more prompt to this, and then we're done with the live stuff. All right, so this last prompt, we can come back here. Does it have information yet? No. This last prompt, while that is running, so take all of the stuff that we did before, but look at this. Consider performance-based learning, past performance-based learning conclusions that have found that personal information is a hypernym of personal data based on usage. That's the curated stuff. That's the stuff where people are going to come in, the internal auditors, the external auditors, they're going to have a say, the stakeholders are going to have a say. But what you also want to do is you also want to say in your output, I want you to have a structure that says alternative analysis, meaning that you're going to look at it with the weight based on what the preference-based learning says, but you're also going to give me a secondary analysis over here that says, give me the analysis if you're not taking into consideration preference-based learning. Because as you're going through preference-based learning, you're going to be introducing bias. And I don't know if we have the output for that. And I don't know if we have the output for that yet. Wow, this one's moving faster than that one. We're just going to go skip to this very last one because it has everything from the previous one in it as well. Here's all of our explainability scores. Here's our PRBL influence and how that affected it. Here's the methods used. There's the explanation, and then there's our alternative analysis. Explainability, transparency. Include what other people said. Use data that we can look at. Analyze it in a certain way. Implementation details, output, explainability, and transparency. Just like an AUP, okay? Acceptable audit practices, agreed upon practices. That needs to be agreed upon explainable AI practices in your organization. All right? In a nutshell, just with that term within the time frame I have today, that's how you get to explainable AI. Now, let's go back to where we were with that ERG. We went micro for a bit. Now we need to go back to macro, to risk and compliance, the risk of non-compliance, realistically, or even just the risk that threats, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities bring to our business as examined in the entity relationship graph that we're looking at here. And you're also probably wondering, unless you're a mathematician, logistician, or Jim Bricknell over at my new company favorite name, morecowbellunlimited.com. You've got to admire a company that's named by that. And by the way, Jim is friggin' brilliant. That's Shannon's calculation for entropy. All right, that's what that is. What is that? Well, by the way, this graphic, I didn't know how to describe the graphic. My marketing guys are just going bat crap crazy that I'm showing this stuff this morning. I had to go out to DALL-E and say, hey, could you do me a favor and explain Shannon entropy to me like I'm like a 2-year-old? So I'm going to let you read this on screen for yourself, but it's really a measure of complexity and uncertainty, or Shannon entropy is a fundamental concept we use to quantify the amount of uncertainty or randomness in any data set. In our case, risk and compliance. When applied to an entity relationship graph, it really helps measure the compliance, the complexity and predictability of the relationships between the entities. Do we have real relationships? Is the predictability real? Does this really tie in from here to here to here? Are the synapses working? So in other words, if a new regulation comes in or is updated to bring it back to us, we're going to have to apply this stuff in risk and compliance. What's the predictability that our organization can secure our systems prior to a threat, a weakness, or a vulnerability taking us out? That's what that's used for. Okay, there are 5 reasons that this is important to you in risk and compliance. And we're going to go through all 5 of those right now. First one is understanding complexity. Another wonderful DALL-E picture. If anybody knows how to actually get DALL-E to do something that's worthwhile, give me a chat. I'll trade you a bottle of wine. Understanding complexity helps break down the complexity of an ERG by making the relationships and interactions between the entities clear. Okay. When calculating Shannon entropy, it's really important to understand what's causing the complexity and uncertainty. And it gives us insights into how the entities are related and why certain patterns show up, making it easier to accurately measure the entropy. So in our case here, we've got threats, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, hitting our knowledge and skills, hitting our configuration items, hitting our data and our records, our tasks, our functions. So, it's how many data types does the regulation say we have to track? That adds to complexity. How many assets do we have to protect based on the data we're tracking? So, if FCI and CUI are coming up, if you're in the CMMC world, and if you're using Big ID, if you're using some of the others that we partner with, they're going to be able to tell you where your data lives. Is it everywhere? Is it somewhere? Is it a lot of data? Is it a little data? That's complexity. So you're going to have to look at the entropy thing is how much data spread where. Or if you're asking my wife, where does Dorian put all the stuff he has in his pockets when he comes home? That's pure entropy, according to her. But back to us, for each asset, how many applications and settings do we have to configure? What type of records do we need to protect? Where are they sitting? What's the processes that are in scope? Who's assigned to each process? And do they even know what in the world they're doing? Entropy will help understand complexity. So is this being done in the real world? Yeah, it actually kind of is, and it's kind of cool. So wouldn't it be great to understand complexity from Winnie the Pooh out to Stephen Hawking with Harry Potter in the middle? Could you do this with an ERG graph? Not only can you, GRI is doing this in their carrot and sticks report using calculations that we came up with and a much cooler output. I had a 1 to 10. They came up with Winnie the Pooh, Harry Potter to Stephen Hawking. Brilliant. That's, showing that to your board. Hey, look, the new regulation came in. How complex is it? It's Stephen Hawking, we're screwed. Or, wow, the new regulation changes are in. They're somewhere between Harry Potter and Winnie the Pooh. Great, wonderful. We can get that done with the next time frame. You've got to take the complexity and the understanding of the complexity, the relationships of this stuff, and then output it using explainable AI to show how you got there. But also, don't forget you're talking to humans. So, okay, now let's look at point 2, identifying key factors by domain. XAI can point the most important factors in your ERG that contribute to high entropy. All right. It helps you focus on the areas to manage complexity and reduce uncertainty. It can show you how different regulations and mandates interact with the ERG, highlighting the complex areas that they have. I'm going to do a study with Jim, Mr. Bricknell, who's probably listening this morning. So he's probably going, really, you're announcing a study we're doing without talking to me? Okay. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. Ping us. I want to figure out how to look at complexity, how to manage the XAI of understanding complexity. And I want to take just one simple document. Everybody has PCI. PCI just went through a change. How do we analyze PCI previous version to PCI this version? How do we have a baseline? How do we understand what the key factors are? Nobody set that out yet. We have to define that. So why don't we, this community, get together and define what that accountability looks like, what that explainability looks like? I think that would be really, really cool. And there's a lot of super smart people here that I'll be reaching out to. You got to go back and listen to Alina. You got to go back and listen to Shaista. All right. So it also helps in building trust. When you calculate Shannon entropy scores, they need to trust the results, right? Because, if you give them, I swear, if you give your CEO or your CTO or your CSO something like that, they're going to look at you like, yeah, right, go away from me. Maybe your finance person might understand it, but the rest of those people are going to say, yeah, go away from me. They're going to want this. So you're going to have to build trust in that says, look, this is how we calculated it. This is the factors that we considered. And these are the things that we need to get to first, second, third, and fourth. How do we know? And you have to build that trust. How do we know? All right. I hope I have time for a really quick joke. My favorite joke in the whole wide world. So there's these two old comedians, Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks. And they used to come into my grandfather's restaurant. So I got to listen to them as a little kid. And part of the shtick would be Carl Reiner would interview Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks is supposed to be 2,000 years old. He'd interview him about lots of things, right? And so Carl Reiner says, and we're sitting in there, and I was a little kid. We just watched the man land on the moon, right? And so they came in, and I got to ask him a question. I said, Mr. Brooks, Mr. Reiner, ask him this. Ask him, what's the neatest technology? And so Carl Reiner says, Mel, in your 2,000 years, what's the greatest technological achievement? And Mel Brooks says, thinks about it, goes, the thermos. Carl Reiner looked at him. I looked at him. He said, the thermos? We just landed a man on the moon. Actually, I think I might have even blurted that out. No, he just landed on the moon. And he said, nah, it's the thermos. And Carl Reiner, with a straight face, looked at him and said, why is that so great? Mel Brooks says, it keeps hot things hot. It keeps cold things cold. Carl Reiner said, yeah. How does it know? The problem with giving these presentations is nobody laughs. The problem with telling that joke at home is nobody laughs there either. But XAI, building trust. How do we know? You have to know how you got to those key factors by domain. You have to know what the level of complexity is. So you're building. And then you have to ensure accountability. That's that stuff we've been talking about. XAI is the key here. It ensures that every step in the entropy calculation is traceable and understandable. The accountability helps address these issues and questions that might come up during the audit and review. Because, folks, this isn't for you. This isn't for me. This is for your key stakeholders, the least of which are going to be your internal and external auditors. So any use of AI in understanding and identifying key risk factors has to be accomplished by explainability and accountability. All right, that's where we get to the wrap up, the grand finale. Hey, they haven't even come out with a hook yet to drag me off. This is great. I'm going to let you read the summary. I don't need to read. You can read. I hate bullet points, but I couldn't come up with anything better. Explainable AI, folks, it plays a critical role in calculating and interpreting Shannon entropy. Shannon entropy is the thing that tells you with predictability how complex the regulatory guidelines are, how complex the attack is that's coming on in, and your capability of responding to it. All right. If you're not doing that, if you got some risk analysis, the drunken zombies over at SCHAF has this stupid risk system up there that is the most inane, most simplistic thing I've ever seen. That's it's not risk. Risk is real. Risk is running thousands of checks on things, running real stuff like this. XAI has to be used because it's not just AI, it's not just explainable AI, but it's explicit AI, but it's explainable AI because it has to ensure transparency in every step of the way. What questions did you ask? What method did you want to use? What libraries were using to examine it? Are you taking into account any previous preference-based learning? What was the preference based on? Can you give me an answer that is sans preference-based learning so that I can compare the two? So if I ever have to go back a few steps and unlearn what we just did, we can go do that. That's XAI. And it has to provide clear, interpretable insights into the uncertainty of your relationships with your ERG. So what do you do with this? You ask your team, your CSO, these three questions. Is our compliance framework in the form of an ERG? Okay, I had to take a pause for a second there because I had to think of all the swear words I wanted to say if you were using a spreadsheet as your compliance framework. If you're using some simplistic table as your compliance framework, it's not a compliance framework. It's a spreadsheet. All right, go calculate your monthly expenses or something, or your golf scores. Your compliance framework has to begin with analyzing that content that's coming in as data, analyzing multi-word expressions and tagging them, adding them to a dictionary, understanding the relationship of what can affect each of those named entities in your dictionary, and what they affect in turn, what you're looking for in turn. That's a compliance framework. That ERG fits within the overall knowledge graph of your organization so that you can have an AMA and you can say, hey, look, I found this data on that system. What things do I need to apply? How complex is this going to be? Looking at the HR that we have over there, who's assigned to this? Do we have the right skills assigned in our system? And those skills have been trained for the knowledge and tasks that they need to perform? Do they know that? That's risk analysis of compliance, of security operations. Do you employ XAI measures when mapping in your content? Do you have preference-based learning? What did Alina call it yesterday? She had a great name, operant something or another. Oh my gosh, go back and listen to it. It was fantastic. Some of the presentations yesterday were great. Listen to those things. Go back and say, how are we tying that in? And then lastly, if a new regulation appears, what's the predictability of you being able to actually do this before you're nailed? All right, that's what you have to ask. Go here and you can download the stuff I was using. You can download the tables. You can download the prompts. You can download the deck. You can ask me a bunch of questions and we'll help because we're all in this together. And Joaquin, I so want to thank you for all of the, this really great symposium you've put together. It's fantastic.
Dorian, first, I just want to say you are hilarious. And I was on the floor rolling around laughing throughout the whole presentation. I know it's kind of tough delivering to this wall of a crowd, but I guarantee you that other people will find everything that you said first educational, enlightening, insightful, and not to mention funny. As soon as I met you, I knew you were the right guy to be the keynote and sort of give shine a light on this very important topic. I know we're kind of all living our day-to-day lives and thinking about the world as individuals, but when it comes to ensuring that multinational organizations or national organizations, basically organizations that have disproportionate effect in society, you want to make sure that there's checks and balances in place and you do your part to make sure that they're in order and that the world is in order by making sure that they're complying with the rules and regulations that are meant to protect them and protect us. So
Thank you.
it's very exciting stuff.
Yeah,
And
it is.
and your background is incredibly polished as well. I mean, I haven't come across too many people that have 22 plus patents in their respective area of expertise, especially to deepen deepen the knowledge of technology that you have and to further innovate in this space. We need it. We need innovation. As you said, you were doing knowledge graphs before knowledge graphs was cool. You were doing database and taxonomies to enrich all this complexity before it was cool. People are just worried about pumping the latest regulations out, but they're not concerned about refactoring or reusing these conditional, requirements. So
Exactly. And Alina had a great presentation yesterday. The thing with the dogs and the training and the pre-operant conditioning, everything else like that. We need to get together as a corporate body meaning all of us, get together and say, look, this is where we're going. Some really great work is being done by the folks at grcschema.org, where they're taking all of the schemas and they're making the schemas standard, making the schemas public, and saying, okay, this is where we're going. I know Unified Compliance is part of it. The guys at ServiceNow are part of it. They actually named the schemas up there, the common data format schemas. And so, we need to come up with a common data format for how do we describe entropy for risk and compliance? How do we, we're at the nation stages right now. And listening to all the presentations yesterday, listening to where people were talking about bringing it together. 2 years ago, GAI didn't exist. 2 years ago, we were still doing explainable AI and looking at, okay, how do we go from explicit rules to tacit rules? Explicit knowledge to tacit knowledge without losing accountability. And now with explainable AI coming into it, with the systems tying together, we can get there. But now we have to standardize that language for building that trust, for building that explainability, so it's always the same.
Yeah, I don't know why people want to reinvent the wheel. I know initially people aren't so enthusiastic about it, adopting other people's rules because everybody wants to be the innovator or creator of these things. But like the Emperor Manchu, I think during the Qing Dynasty,
Yep.
had conquered all the different states in China and consolidated them under one empire. The consolidation of these territories or at least brain spaces allows for common measurement systems, weights,
Right.
lengths, and all these sorts of things that allow for trade and communication to be richer. What if we didn't have GAAP? What if we didn't have generally accepted accounting
Right.
principles?
Right.
Everybody would be doing funky, funny math, and we'd be reconciling and interrogating what the hell does this mean? We need to have a standard
Yeah.
internationally.
And even if it's a federated standard, even if we say, look, we only need to agree on these things. It was interesting. The gentleman at ServiceNow who coined the common data format said, look, we're ServiceNow. This is the part we care about. NIST cares about that part. Oasis cares about that part. regex cares about that part. We care about this part. As long as we can share this core with NIST, with regex, with Oasis, then we can say, hey, this is great. So we can federate what needs to be federated in a system. And then for the outlying content, for people that want to do special things on their own, let them. But as long as we have this core understanding together, that's great. And if you think about it, that's really how the EU works. That's how the United States works. If you think that all the states are the same, yeah, right. Drive from Kentucky to Illinois. We got 50 people who've agreed not to shoot at each other right now. But there's laws in each state. Then there's a federal government underneath. The EU has the same thing for the countries. There's what you deal with in the countries, and then there's the federated at the EU at the top, and how they're going to deal with it. And now in Europe, you can drive from one country to the other as long as they're in the EU, just like you're driving in the States. It doesn't make any difference. They have a single monetary unit, which is great. They have a single system for transport, which is great. Cool. Let's do that with each other. Let's take this community of these wonderful like-minded presenters and start building that common federated methodology for explaining risk and compliance and entropy therein. I think that would be really, really cool.
Global standards, global agreements, and localized expression or
localized implementation and expression. Exactly. We could do that. Right, Alina? Right, Shasta?
Do you have any words to people that are not necessarily from this world? You're sort of peering down, because you're usually tackling things at a high level with governments and with the higher C-suite level that are trying to remain compliant. Can you translate this message in the simplest form to somebody who's like an everyday citizen, how this impacts them?
Yeah, look, an everyday citizen, laws are going to come out, regulations are going to come out to protect you. You've got to understand how complex they are, because they're complex. I'm not going to lie. They're not simple. You've got to have a simple way of going back to your bosses, the people who are going to give you the funding to protect you, the people that have to agree to play with you. And you have to have a simple way of saying, guys, this is what we've been following. Here's how we've been implementing it. Now here's what they want us to follow. And there's how we've been implementing that, and look at the gaps. How can we fill these gaps? What's our predictability? How can we get from here to here? What's our predictability level of not screwing this up? Because you've got to be able to say to your bosses, you know, I want to get from point A to point B, but I don't have these people. I don't have these skills. I don't have these tools. In order to get from where this regulation says we're at today and what we have to do, and we put all of our staff against it. Now they're saying we got to go do this. Great. We can't stop them from saying that, but we have an obligation to do that. Here's what we're missing. And here's the complexity level of it, or the cost level of it, or the training level of it that we're going to get there. And what's the risk that we're not going to get there? That comes out in these scores that has to be explained to them to get there. Funny enough, if you hadn't jumped on, I was going to go back through some of these slides and cover exactly those things. That's a perfect question. You have to go back and look at, remember that entity relationship graph that I had on the screen. Mm-hmm. You have to go back and look at that and say, okay, we now have that data now has to be protected. There are standards out there that, how we have to label it. The brand new standards for labeling comes out. Do the records management people even know about that? That might be a score. Do the records management people have the system to put that labeling into place? That adds to the score. Do the records system people trained on what that data is or what that pattern is to recognize? That goes into the score. So, you got to go figure out in your organization how to look at what the regulation is saying, what those mandates are, how they tag into things you actually have in your organization. And then, okay, how do I implement that control? Go therefore and protect this thing, or refrain from doing stupid crap to this thing. And then you look at it and say, okay, do we have those systems in place? How do we score whether we do or not? How do we present that as we can get there in time, or not get there in time before somebody might hit us? That's real risk. That's explainability. Is we use these methods, we use these libraries to look at it, and we use these calculations based on, do we have it, do we not have it? And then you got to make it simple. You got to make it Winnie the Pooh, Harry Potter, and Stephen Hawking simple. Well, don't make anything Stephen Hawking simple, but make the graph Stephen Hawking simple. I didn't even understand the movie he was in.
You bring up a good point, and I think that points out to a deeper issue here, that there's a dissolution of a breakdown in communication, because we live in different worlds. One of the things that I was working as a support engineer for an educational technology company. One of the things that was kind of a punch in the gut to me was when a superior, like a product manager, explained to me, technology is here to serve the business. Technology is here to enable the organization, when I felt that technology was a form of expression. So right. That showed my own enthusiasm and ignorance showed, and I've seen this with other people as well, that when people want to create and be expressive through a function that's supposed to enable clear communication, sometimes priorities shift, and rather than using technology to support a unification or interoperability between other organizations, it's sort of a fun house. I want to implement this cool technology and that technology.
Right.
The problem has already been solved for thousands of years. We just want to have fun and try to solve it in a different way. But there's no different way. It's just one way.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's analyzing what you have. It's presenting it in a way that you can understand it, and yet still be invited back to present again. The first time I ever presented risk, I was the youngest member of the management executive committee of the largest ad agency in the world. They just bought my company. They made me, my gosh, the Interpublic Group. They gave me like 19 titles, right? CIO, director of, executive vice president in charge of digital marketing, executive vice president in charge of God knows what, right? And my very first presentation to the board, I had found the server that served 80% of the ads in all of the United States, scheduled when they needed to run. Looked at, is it raining in Duluth? Well, then show the BMW commercial of it driving in the rain. Is it snowing in Poughkeepsie? Great. Have a thing for Bridgestone snow tires in Poughkeepsie. And so it was driving all that. I had found it in the basement of the building we were in. Oh gosh, I wish I had that picture of my mom right now. It's at my mom's house. I'd found it at the picture of the basement we were in, and there was a pipe leaking not far from it. And luckily we had the guy who did the raid cartoons, with the bugs. He worked for us. So I was thinking, how do I explain the urgency of getting this darn server out of here and into some protected system with backups around the world? Because if this thing goes down, we owe millions and millions and millions of dollars, but we're only making fractions of pennies per ad, right? So I said, how do I explain this to them? And so I went to the guy and I said, I know, I'm going to do it in one picture. And I went to him and I said, here's the picture of where this thing is at. Explain how bad it is for me in one picture, because that's what I'm going to show the board. I'll find the picture for you. I'll send it to you. And he drew this picture for me in marker in like half an hour of me standing in a raincoat in a basement with a server on with like things around it, so it was floating, a rat sitting on top of the server, me holding a flashlight on it, saying ad server. And so that's what I went to the board with. And I said, that's your ad server right there. It's in the third basement of this building. And if you don't understand the badness of that picture, you need to fire me right now, because we can't talk to each other. Yeah, I remember the Don Seeley was the CFO. I just love that guy. He looked at me and goes, why are you still standing here? Why are you still standing here? Why are you not going downstairs immediately and doing something about it? I'm saying, I take it I have budget. Don said, get the hell out of here. Go fix that thing. Just send me the damn checks. Time checks. Excuse me. I'm online. Sorry, Mom. Promise not to swear. And so, but it's got to be explainability. I explained the problem we had using a cartoon. If you don't want your ad server floating by with rats on it and a leaking, I think like there's a pipe with water coming out of it and stuff. If you don't want that, give me budget. That's how explainable AI has got to get there.
Yeah, using symbols, layering them in meaningful ways that paints the context.
Right. And you can't have some idiot saying, well, here, the dog, and the banana. I didn't really have time to go into it this morning, but if you look at the analysis and everybody grabs the things,
that's hilarious.
Hey, that's a real story, I swear. So here's the other one. Do we even have a second? Are we over time or no?
We could wrap it up with this one, but
all right. Here's the same guy right after that. You got to be kidding me, man. And I said, okay, dog and a banana. I was kind of reeling from that one. And I have only have a little whiteboard in here, but at our old office, we're in our training and lunchroom, it was a whole big wall, right? And my staff can tell you this is really true. And I got so mad at him, I dragged him over by the collar and I wrote a bunch of words on the board. And he's this British guy, and he had all this, all the right stuff behind his name, ISACA this and then ISSA that and all that crap. And I wrote all these words on the board because he wasn't even tagging things the right way. And I said, underline the nouns, circle the verbs. And the dude circled hospital. And I was like, what are you doing? I said, that's a noun. Oh, no, it's not. He said, it's a verb. It can be a verb. I said, no, it can't. He goes, no, look, I'm sick. I have to hospital. I couldn't physically throw him out fast enough. I was like, yeah, you'll find a check in the mail. You got to go. You got to leave.
This is going to be the segue to bias, keeping bias out of models.
You got to keep bias out of models. Exactly. That was one of the other calculations in the very last one I showed them, preference-based learning. How do you check for preference-based bias? How in your explainable AI then do you say, okay, here is the preference-based learning that we got to, but here's the answer without preference-based learning. And then you have to have in your system, at what point did we deviate with that preference-based learning? What answers started going down a path less traveled based on bias? And at what point could we go back into the AI and retrain the model, show that dog and banana don't get a fair play?
If you're gonna take anything away from this presentation, just know that some dude feeds his dog bananas.
Feeds his dogs bananas.
Thank you, Dorian. We'll catch you on the next one.
All right. Thank you guys very much. Really, really appreciate it.